It was a quiet evening. The kind of evening that used to feel comfortable, like slipping into your favorite sweater after a long day. Mark and I were sitting on the couch, the TV humming in the background. The house felt empty, though. It always did lately. The little things we used to share, the jokes, the smiles, even the comfortable silences, were starting to feel forced. I couldn't pinpoint when it all began to slip, but I could feel it now, like a weight on my chest, suffocating me little by little. We had just finished dinner, and Mark, who had always been so easygoing, seemed off. His eyes weren't as warm, his smile wasn't as genuine. He'd been distant for weeks, but I didn't know how to talk about it without sounding like I was complaining. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, but I knew I wasn't happy. I glanced over at him, noticing the way he was sitting, his body angled away from mine. The tension between us was palpable, and for a brief moment, I thought about how much I missed the way we used to be. We used to laugh for hours. We used to talk about our dreams and our future. It felt like those conversations were from another lifetime. I couldn't stop thinking about how far we had drifted. How much I had changed in this marriage, how much I had compromised, how much I had tried to hold everything together while everything around me was falling apart. I had been feeling it for a while now, a kind of shame that I couldn't explain. I was ashamed of the life we had built, ashamed of what we had become. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I had this fleeting thought that if I didn't say it out loud, it might go away. So I did. I didn't even realize what I was saying until the words were out of my mouth. They came tumbling out, without warning. "I'm ashamed to go out with you sometimes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air between us like a thick fog. I immediately regretted them, but it was too late. The damage was done. For a moment, there was only silence. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel the tension rising in the room, thick and suffocating. My heart raced in my chest, and I mentally cursed myself. Why had I said that? Why couldn't I just keep my feelings to myself? Mark didn't respond at first. He just sat there, still and silent, staring ahead at the TV. The sound of the show continued in the background, but it felt like all the noise in the world had faded away. His jaw tightened, and I saw his hand ball into a fist. The muscles in his shoulders tensed, and I could feel the anger radiating off of him, even without him saying a word. And then, finally, he spoke. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice cold. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I opened my mouth to apologize, to take it back, but before I could, he stood up. The movement was sharp, quick, like a jolt of electricity running through him. His eyes were hard, distant, and I felt a wave of panic rise in me. "I can't do this anymore, Emily," he said, his voice quieter now, but the finality in it was clear. "If that's how you feel, then, we're done." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know how to respond. The weight of his words hit me like a punch in the gut. I felt dizzy, disoriented, as if the room had started spinning around me. It felt surreal, like I was watching this moment happen from outside of my body. "Mark, wait, I didn't mean it like that," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. But he didn't stop. He didn't look back. He just grabbed his jacket from the chair and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. "I need space," he said, not even bothering to look at me as he opened the door. "Move on, Emily. It's over." And just like that, he was gone. I sat there, frozen. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, the weight of his words crushing me. How had it come to this? How had a simple, careless remark torn apart everything we had? How had I gotten to a point where I felt like I couldn't even be myself with the person I had promised to spend my life with? I sat there for a long time, the silence in the room pressing down on me, suffocating me. The TV was still on, the background noise meaningless. My mind raced with a million thoughts, but none of them made sense. I couldn't understand what had just happened. I couldn't understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to make sense of everything, but nothing seemed to fit together. I kept replaying that night in my head over and over, each time wishing I had said something different, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Mark would still be here. But he wasn't. And the worst part? He hadn't even given me a chance to explain myself. To tell him that it wasn't about him. It wasn't about the person he was. It was about the things I was holding inside, things I couldn't share, things I didn't know how to say. I tried to reach out to him, texting, calling, but he ignored every attempt. His silence was deafening. The silence that had always been a safe space between us was now a cold and empty void. The house that had once felt like a home now felt like a prison. Every corner, every piece of furniture seemed to remind me of what I had lost. Of what I had done. I didn't know what hurt more, his leaving or the fact that I had pushed him to that point. I knew I had said something I shouldn't have. I knew my words had cut him, but I also knew that there was more to it than just that one moment. We had been drifting for months, maybe even years. I had felt it, but I never knew how to address it. I thought if I just kept quiet and went along with things, we could avoid the hard conversations. But now, those hard conversations were all I could think about. And in the silence, I realized that I had been avoiding more than just talking. I had been avoiding myself. The nights were the hardest. I would lie in bed, the sheets cold beside me where Mark used to be. I could still feel his presence in the room, but it wasn't comforting anymore. It was suffocating. I would close my eyes, but the silence never went away. I had no one to talk to, no one to share my feelings with. My friends reached out, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. How could I? How could I admit that I had pushed my husband away without even realizing it? How could I admit that I was too afraid to speak my truth, too afraid to confront the person I had become? A week went by, and the weight of it all only grew heavier. I would sit at the kitchen table in the mornings, staring at the coffee cup in front of me, but the taste of the coffee was bitter, like everything else. The house, once filled with laughter and conversation, now felt like a hollow shell. Every room was empty. Every corner felt like a reminder of the emptiness inside me. I had never realized how much I depended on Mark until he was gone. Then came the phone call. I saw his name flash on the screen, and for a moment, my heart skipped a beat. I stared at it, unsure of whether I should answer. What could he possibly want to say to me now? What could I possibly say to him? I took a deep breath and answered. Hello? There was a long pause before he spoke, his voice sounding distant and strained. Emily. I've been thinking. I felt my pulse quicken. My breath hitched in my chest. Was he going to apologize? Was he coming back? I know I left. And I know I didn't give you a chance to explain. I was angry, and I didn't know how to handle it, he said, his voice faltering. But I've been thinking about what you said. I felt a lump form in my throat. The words were stuck. I didn't know how to respond. I don't know if I can fix things, he continued, but I want you to know that I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I just didn't know what to do anymore. The words hit me like a wave. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of what he had said. He hadn't left because he didn't love me, he had left because he didn't know how to fix it. And neither did I. I'm sorry, I whispered, even though I wasn't sure if I was apologizing to him or to myself. I'm sorry, too, he replied quietly. But I think we both need to figure out what we really want. And I think we need to do it apart. I didn't know how to respond. The finality in his voice was undeniable, and yet, the love in his words made me want to fight for us, to fight for something that no longer seemed possible. I think you're right, I said after a long pause. Maybe we need time to figure things out. The line went silent for a few seconds, and then he spoke again. Take care, Emily. And just like that, he hung up. The weight of his words settled into me, and I was left with the echo of his voice in my mind. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself trapped in a cycle of reflection. I couldn't seem to move past what had happened. The silence between Mark and me had become unbearable, but more than that, I was haunted by the question of whether I was to blame for everything. I couldn't stop wondering if there was something I could have done differently, something I should have said. Maybe if I had been more open, if I had shared my struggles sooner, we wouldn't be here. I spent a lot of time alone, which, in some ways, gave me the space I needed to think. I would walk around the house, each step a reminder of the life I thought we were building together. The pictures on the walls, the knickknacks on the shelves, all the little things we had picked out together, they seemed so distant now. They felt like someone else's life, a version of me that didn't exist anymore. I tried to keep busy, filling my days with tasks, but it never seemed to distract me long enough. I kept coming back to the same thoughts. I knew Mark had left because of my words, but I also knew he had left because of all the unspoken things between us. We had stopped communicating long before that night. The truth was, I had been ashamed of my own feelings for so long that I hadn't noticed how much I had closed myself off from him. I had built up walls around my heart, and when I needed him the most, he had no way of getting through. It wasn't just the shame I felt about my life, my marriage, it was the shame I felt about myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had become so focused on making things work, on trying to fit into the mold of what I thought I was supposed to be, that I lost sight of who I really was. I had put so much pressure on myself to be perfect, to be everything for everyone, and in the process, I had neglected the one person I needed to take care of the most, me. I would often find myself staring into the mirror, wondering how I had gotten to this point. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She seemed sad, tired, and defeated. She wasn't the woman I wanted to be, but she was the woman I had become. And it hurt. It hurt more than I had expected. One evening, after another long day of overthinking, I decided to take a walk. It had started to rain, but I didn't care. The cool air on my face felt like a slap of reality. I needed to feel something other than the weight of my thoughts. As I walked through the empty streets, I realized how much I had been hiding from everything, from the truth. I had been so caught up in my own shame that I hadn't allowed myself to feel. To grieve. To let go. The realization hit me like a wave, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something real. I didn't know where I was going, but I kept walking, letting the rain wash away the weight of my thoughts, one step at a time. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was starting to believe that I could figure it out. That I could rebuild myself, even if it meant doing it alone. The reflection in the mirror might have been sad, but I realized it didn't have to be the reflection I carried with me forever. I could change. I could heal. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to move on my own terms. It was nearly a month before anything significant changed. My days were filled with work, with attempts to rebuild the pieces of my life, but still, the absence of Mark loomed over me. I didn't talk to him, didn't reach out. I couldn't. I had already done enough damage, said things that could never be taken back. But deep down, there was this hope, this part of me that kept thinking, what if he came back? What if he realized that it wasn't too late? Then, one evening, as I was sitting at my kitchen table, alone again, as usual, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but the familiar twist in my stomach told me it was important. I hesitated for a second, but then I picked it up. Hello? My voice was tentative, unsure. Emily. It was Mark's voice. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. His tone was different, distant but calm. Mark? I whispered, as if saying his name would make this moment more real. Yeah. I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about everything. He paused, and I could hear him sigh deeply. And I need to say something. I held my breath, trying to steady my racing heart. This was it. This could be the moment we either started to heal, or it would mark the end of everything. I've been a mess, he continued. I know I left, and I know I didn't give you a chance to explain. I was angry, but I shouldn't have walked away like that. I should have listened. We both should have listened. I don't know what I was expecting, but I've spent a lot of time thinking, and I've realized that what you said wasn't about me. It was about you. About how you felt. I didn't see that. I felt the sting of his words, but this time it wasn't painful. It was healing. He was finally acknowledging what I had known all along. That my shame, my feelings, were mine to carry, not his. I should have done better by you, Emily, he went on, his voice quieter now. I shouldn't have ignored you. I shouldn't have assumed anything. I was so focused on being hurt that I couldn't see you were hurting too. I wanted to say something, but the words caught in my throat. This was it, the validation I had been craving, the acknowledgement that I wasn't just an angry wife who had said something hurtful. I was a person, too, with my own struggles, my own pain. I blinked back tears. Mark, I'm sorry too, I managed to say. I shouldn't have said what I did. I wasn't just upset about you, but about everything, about me. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to handle myself. There was another long pause. It wasn't awkward, but it felt like we were both waiting for something. Something to change, something to shift. Finally, he spoke again. I don't know what happens next, Emily. But I don't want us to end like this. I don't know if we're meant to be together, but I know I can't just walk away from you. Not like this. I could feel my chest tightening. What did this mean? Was he asking for another chance, or was he just trying to make peace with our past? I didn't know, and part of me didn't want to know. I'm not sure what I want either, I said honestly. But maybe we both need time. To figure things out. To figure out who we are. Without each other. For now. There was silence on the other end of the line. And for a moment, I thought he might hang up, might say something to close the door entirely. But instead, he spoke softly. Okay, Emily. I can respect that. I just want you to know. I'm here. If you need me. No matter what happens. I felt something shift inside of me. Not a sense of finality, but a sense of possibility. The past wasn't gone, but maybe, just maybe, we could both move forward. In our own way. It's been a few months since that phone call. Mark and I haven't rushed into anything, but we've slowly started to rebuild some kind of relationship. It's not the same as it was before, and I'm not sure it ever will be. But that's okay. I've come to understand that what happened wasn't just about him or me, it was about both of us, and about the life we were trying to build together, even if we didn't have the tools to do so at the time. I remember the first time we sat down together again, after weeks of space, both of us trying to figure out what we wanted. We met at the cafe near our apartment. It was a strange kind of calm between us, not awkward, but not completely comfortable either. We sat there, sipping coffee, the silence between us not heavy but thoughtful. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said, his hands wrapped around his cup, his eyes looking anywhere but at me. About what I want. What you want. Anne. I think I need to apologize. For how I left. For not giving you the space to talk. For not listening. I smiled softly. There was no bitterness in his words now, no frustration. Just honesty. You don't need to apologize for everything, Mark, I replied. I should have been more honest with you, too. About how I was feeling. About what I was ashamed of. He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. There was no judgment in his eyes anymore, only the recognition of the mess we had created. And strangely, that gave me some peace. The thing is, after everything we went through, after the silence, the pain, the separation, I had changed. I wasn't the woman I was before, the one who would hide her feelings to please him or anyone else. I had learned to value myself, to take care of my own heart first. I wasn't waiting for him to fix me, and I wasn't looking for him to fill the emptiness inside me. I had found that strength in myself. But something else had changed too. There was a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a way forward for us. We didn't need to rush into anything, and we didn't need to pretend that everything was perfect. But maybe, if we took it slow, if we continued to listen and be patient, we could find something new. Something real. I don't know what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady. But I do know that I don't want to live in shame anymore. I don't want to feel like I'm not enough. And I don't want you to feel that way either. Mark looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't just regret or guilt. It was understanding. It was a new kind of respect, one that didn't depend on who we used to be, but on who we were now. Neither do I, he said quietly. We sat there for a while longer, just talking. About everything and nothing. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was peaceful. There was no pressure to figure everything out right then and there. We both understood that there was no perfect resolution, no grand gesture that would make everything better. But that was okay. Life wasn't perfect, and neither were we. And maybe that was exactly what we needed to understand. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in months, I feel hopeful. Not about Mark or us, but about me. About who I am becoming. And maybe, just maybe, we can walk down a new path, together or apart, but with the understanding that we are both enough as we are.